The red dust of Planet Vex 7 swirled around Lieutenant Jake Morrison's boots as he crouched behind a broken wall. His rifle felt heavy in his hands, but not as heavy as the silence that filled the air. This was supposed to be a simple scouting mission. Check the area, report back, and leave. Nothing complicated, but nothing ever stayed simple when the Corvan Empire was involved. Jake looked through his scope at the research station below. Smoke rose from several buildings. Bodies lay scattered across the ground. The Corvans had hit this place hard and fast. These aliens were known for their cruelty. They took prisoners, destroyed everything else, and left nothing but fear behind. "Lieutenant, we should go," whispered Corporal Lisa Brown from behind him. "The Corvans might. Come back." Jake knew she was right. Their small squad of 6 soldiers was not meant for fighting. They were scouts, not warriors. But something bothered him about this place. The research station belonged to the Zephyrians, a peaceful race that studied plants and animals. They never hurt anyone. 5 more minutes, Jake said quietly. Something doesn't feel right. Private Danny White crawled up next to them. His young face was pale with worry. "Sir, I'm picking up movement in the main building. Could be survivors." Jake's heart jumped. Survivors meant people who needed help, people who were probably scared and hurt. He had joined the Earth Defense Corps to protect innocent life, not to run away when things got dangerous. "Show me," Jake said. Danny handed him a small scanner. The screen showed heat signatures inside the largest building. Most were very faint, probably dying. But one signal was stronger. It was small, maybe a child. Jake made his decision. "Brown, take Martinez and Kim. Set up a watch on the ridge. If you see Corvans coming back, radio me immediately. White and Johnson, you're with me." "Sir, our orders were to observe only," Brown said carefully. "I know what our orders were," Jake replied. His voice was firm but not angry. "But I won't leave survivors to die. Not on my watch." The 3 soldiers moved down the hill toward the research station. Jake's boots crunched on broken glass and twisted metal. The smell of smoke and something worse filled his nose. Bodies of Zephyrian researchers lay where they had fallen. These aliens looked almost human, but their skin was silver and their eyes were large and violet-colored. Jake had seen death before, but it never got easier. These people had been scientists, not soldiers. They had families, dreams, hopes for the future. Now they were gone because the Corvans wanted to expand their territory. The main building's door hung open, torn from its frame. Jake went in first, his rifle ready. The inside was a mess. Equipment was smashed, papers scattered everywhere. But the scanner still showed that heat signature somewhere deeper in the building. They moved through halls filled with broken furniture and shattered windows. Danny checked his scanner every few steps. The signal was getting stronger. "This way," Danny whispered, pointing down a narrow corridor. At the end of the hall was a storage room. The door was slightly open. Jake could hear something inside, soft breathing. Maybe crying. He pushed the door open slowly. Inside, behind stacks of boxes and equipment, something moved. Jake lowered his rifle and stepped forward. "Hello?" he said gently. "We're here to help." A small figure emerged from the shadows. It was a Zephyrian child, probably 8 years old by human standards. Her silver skin was dirty and scratched. Her violet eyes were wide with fear and tears. She wore a simple blue dress that was torn and stained. Jake's heart broke looking at her. This little girl had watched her world destroyed. She had hidden while everyone she knew was killed, And now she was alone, terrified, and probably thought these new strangers would hurt her too. Jake knelt down slowly, making himself smaller and less threatening. He set his rifle aside and held up his empty hands. "It's okay," he said softly. "We're humans. We're the good guys. We want to help you." The girl stared at him for a long moment. She said something in her own language, words Jake couldn't understand, but he could hear the fear and sadness in her voice. "Danny, do you have any food?" Jake asked without taking his eyes off the child. Danny pulled a ration bar from his pack and handed it over. Jake broke off a small piece and offered it to the girl. She looked at it suspiciously, then took it with shaking hands. She ate it quickly, like she hadn't had food in hours. "What's your name?" Jake asked, speaking slowly and clearly. The girl seemed to understand. She pointed to herself and said, "Lyra." "Lyra," Jake repeated, smiling. "That's a pretty name. I'm Jake." He pointed to himself. "Jake." Lyra nodded slightly. Some of the fear left her eyes. Jake's radio crackled. Brown's voice came through. "Lieutenant, we've got Corvan ships on the horizon. Maybe 10 minutes out." Jake's blood ran cold. 10 minutes to get out of here with a scared child who didn't speak his language. 10 minutes to save an innocent life before the monsters came back. "We have to go," Jake told Lyra. He didn't know if she understood the words, but she seemed to understand his tone. She nodded and stepped toward him. Jake scooped her up gently. She was light, probably not getting enough food, even before this attack. She wrapped her thin arms around his neck and held on tight. "Johnson, take point. Danny, watch our backs. We move fast, but careful," Jake ordered. They ran through the station, avoiding the main corridors where Corvan soldiers might have left traps or sensors. Jake held Lyra close, feeling her small body shake with each explosion of sound from outside. The Corvan ships were getting closer. As they reached the station's edge, Jake looked back at the destruction. This had been a place of learning and discovery. Now it was a graveyard, but at least one life would continue. One child would have a chance to grow up and maybe make the galaxy a little better. Jake pulled his dog tags from around his neck. The metal chain caught the light from the burning buildings. He placed them around Lyra's small neck. "So you remember," he said quietly. "Humans keep their promises. We protect people who can't protect themselves." Lyra looked down at the tags, then up at Jake. For the first time since he found her, she smiled. The rescue shuttle was waiting on the ridge. As they flew away from Vex 7, Jake watched the planet shrink below them. Somewhere down there, the Corvans were probably angry that they had missed one survivor, but Jake didn't care about their anger. He had kept his promise. He had saved a life that mattered. Lyra fell asleep in his arms during the flight, still holding his dog tags. Jake wondered what would happen to her now. Would she find a new family? Would she be safe? Would she remember this day when she grew up? He hoped she would remember that when the worst things happened, humans came to help. He hoped she would know that not all the galaxy was cruel and dark. Some people, human people, would risk everything to save one scared child. That was what made humans special in this vast, dangerous universe. They never gave up on the innocent. 15 years had passed since that terrible day on Vex 7. The galaxy had changed in ways both good and bad. The Corvan Empire was mostly defeated, driven back to their homeworlds by a coalition of species led by Earth. But new threats always seemed to appear from the dark spaces between stars. Colonel Jake Morrison stood in his office aboard the Earth Defense Corps flagship, Liberty. Through the large window, he could see the busy traffic of New Geneva Station. Ships from dozens of different worlds came and went, carrying trade goods, diplomats, and families seeking new homes. It was exactly the kind of peaceful scene he had spent his career fighting to protect. Jake's reflection looked back at him from the window. His brown hair now had streaks of gray at the sides. Lines around his green eyes showed the weight of years spent in command. His uniform carried ribbons and medals that told the story of countless battles and rescue missions. But he still remembered clearly the day he had earned his most important title, Guardian of the Rim. That name had started as a joke among his soldiers. After Vex 7, Jake seemed to find civilians in danger everywhere he went. Mining colonies under attack by pirates, research teams trapped by natural disasters, refugee ships fleeing from war zones. No matter what his official mission was, Jake always found a way to help people who needed it most. The joke became serious when other species started using the name. To them, Jake Morrison was the human who appeared when hope was lost. His reputation spread across the galaxy. Alien mothers told their children stories about the Guardian of the Rim, who would come to save them if monsters ever threatened their worlds. Jake never felt comfortable with the fame. He was just doing his job, but his superiors were smart enough to use his reputation. They gave him command of the Rapid Response Fleet, 6 ships designed to get to trouble spots quickly. Jake and his crews had saved thousands of lives over the years. His current mission was supposed to be simple: escort duty for human diplomats going to peace talks. But Jake had learned not to trust the word simple anymore. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Jake called. Captain Amy Roberts entered and saluted. She was one of Jake's best officers, smart and brave like all the people he chose for his fleet. "Sir, we've received updated intelligence about the Haven 5 summit. The Sindari Collective is bringing their full council. This is bigger than we thought." Jake turned from the window. "How much bigger?" "Representatives from over 40 species will be there, including some who have never been friendly to humans. The Sindari are basically putting humanity on trial. If we fail these talks, we could lose access to half the trade routes in this sector." Jake nodded grimly. Politics were not his favorite part of the job, but he understood their importance. Earth needed allies and trading partners to survive in the galaxy. Humans were still newcomers compared to species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. "What about security?" Jake asked. "Mixed. Station security plus whatever each delegation brings. There are rumors about protest groups, maybe even some extremist factions that want humans expelled from Sindari space entirely. Extremists with weapons are terrorists," Jake said flatly. "I want our people ready for anything. Full gear, but keep it quiet. We're there to protect. Diplomats, not start a war." Amy smiled. "Already done, sir. The teams know the drill." After Amy left, Jake returned to his window. Somewhere out there in the vast galaxy was a young Zephyrian woman named Lyra. He often wondered what had happened to her after Vex 7. The records showed she had been taken to Zephyrian Colony World and adopted by a family there. But that was 15 years ago. She would be a grown woman now, probably with her own life and family. Jake hoped she was happy. He hoped she had found peace after the trauma of losing her parents. Most of all, he hoped she had learned that the galaxy could be good as well as cruel. That was what all his work was really about, making sure children like Lyra could grow up in a safer universe. Meanwhile, on the diplomatic transport ship Harmony, Lyra Windstar stood before a mirror in her cabin, adjusting the formal robes of a Zephyrian diplomat. The silver fabric caught the light beautifully, but she barely noticed. Her mind was focused on the important work ahead. Around her neck, she wore a chain with 2 small metal tags. They were old and worn, with writing in the human language called English. Most people who saw them thought they were some kind of religious symbol. Lyra never corrected them. The truth was more personal than that. These dog tags belonged to the human soldier who had saved her life 15 years ago. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, according to the writing on the metal. She had spent years learning about human culture and military traditions. She knew these tags were important to human soldiers, like a piece of their identity. The fact that he had given them to a scared alien child said everything about what humans could be at their best. Lyra had built her entire career around that moment of human kindness. After her rescue, she had been adopted by Ambassador Kale, Windstar and his wife. They were good people who gave her love and education, but they also understood her obsession with humans and human society. While other young Zephyrians studied art or science, Lyra learned human languages, human history, and human psychology. She wanted to understand the species that had produced someone like Jake Morrison. What she found amazed her. Humans were warriors, yes. They were aggressive and sometimes violent. But they were also incredibly protective of innocence. They would risk their own lives to save complete strangers. They formed bonds across species lines that many aliens thought impossible. They had a phrase, "leave no one behind." To humans, it was not just words. It was a sacred promise. Now Lyra was the youngest diplomat in Zephyrian history. She specialized in human relations and had spent 3 years working at the embassy on Earth. She had walked the streets of human cities, eaten their food, learned their customs. She had even visited military bases and met soldiers like the one who saved her. None of them were Jake Morrison, though. She had tried to find him several times over the years. The Earth Defense Corps was huge, and records from 15 years ago were hard to access. She knew he had been promoted and given important commands, but that was all. For all she knew, he might be dead. Human soldiers died in wars all the time, but she kept his dog tags anyway. They reminded her why she did this work. The Sindori Collective was being influenced by voices that called humans too dangerous for civilized society. They pointed to human military strength and aggressive expansion as proof that Earth's people could not be trusted. Lyra knew better. She had seen human strength used to protect the helpless. She had felt human gentleness in the arms of a soldier who could have left her to die. The galaxy needed to understand what humans really were. Flawed but heroic, strong but caring, feared but ultimately good. Her assistant, a young Zephyrian named Kira, entered the cabin. "Ambassador will be arriving at Haven 5 in 2 hours. The preliminary meetings begin immediately." "Thank you," Lyra said. "Is the presentation ready?" "Yes, ma'am. All the documentation about human rescue operations, civilian protection protocols, and humanitarian aid. The video testimonials from survivors across 12 species. Everything you requested." Lyra nodded. "Good. The Sindari Council needs to see the truth about humans, not the propaganda from their enemies, but the real evidence of human character." As their ship approached Haven 5, Lyra touched the dog tags around her neck. Somewhere in the galaxy, the man who gave these to her was probably still fighting to protect people like her, still keeping the promise he had made to a scared child in the ruins of her world. She wondered if she would ever see him again. Probably not. The galaxy was vast, and their paths had diverged long ago. But his influence on her life continued every day. Every speech she gave about human honor, every argument she made for human inclusion in galactic society, every moment she spent building bridges between species was inspired by one act of kindness from a human soldier. Jake Morrison had saved more than one life that day on Vex 7. He had saved the future of human-alien relations, though he would never know it. The scared child he rescued had grown up to become humanity's greatest advocate among the stars. The summit at Haven 5 would be the most important moment of her career. Representatives from dozens of species would decide whether humans deserved a place in the galactic community. Lyra was ready to fight for them, just as one of them had once fought for her. She owed Jake Morrison that much. She owed it to all the other children who might need a human guardian of the rim to appear when monsters threatened their worlds. The galaxy was safer when humans were part of it, and she would make sure everyone understood that truth. Haven 5 was the most impressive space station Lyra had ever seen. Built at the border between 3 different galactic sectors, it served as neutral ground for species that might otherwise never meet peacefully. The station was enormous, with docking bays for ships of every possible design. Gardens from 100 worlds created a maze of beauty and wonder in the central areas. But today, the beauty was overshadowed by tension. The main diplomatic hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 43 species took their places. This was more than a simple trade negotiation. This was a trial that would decide humanity's future in the galaxy. Lyra stood with the Zephyrian delegation near the center of the hall. Her formal robes marked her as an ambassador, but she felt young among so many experienced diplomats. Around her, aliens of every imaginable type spoke in dozens of languages. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that their bodies required special environmental suits just to survive in the station's atmosphere. The Sindari Council sat at the high table, elevated above everyone else. They were an old species, proud and formal. Their leader, Counselor Thane, had skin like polished stone and eyes that seemed to see everything. He had made it clear that he considered humans to be dangerous newcomers who threatened galactic peace. "The human delegation approaches," announced the protocol officer. Lyra turned toward the main entrance, like everyone else. A group of humans, in formal diplomatic dress, entered the hall, but her attention was immediately drawn to their military escort. 6 soldiers in Earth Defense Corps uniforms walked alongside the diplomats, alert and professional. The lead soldier was a tall man, with graying brown hair and green eyes. He wore the insignia of a full colonel and moved with the confident stride of someone used to command. Something about him seemed familiar, but Lyra couldn't place what. Then he turned slightly, and she saw his profile clearly. Her heart stopped. It was him. 15 years older, with gray in his hair and lines on his face, but unmistakably the same man. The soldier who had carried her to safety through enemy fire, the human who had given her his dog tags and promised that humans would always protect the innocent. Jake Morrison was here. Lyra's hand moved instinctively to the dog tags around her neck. She had imagined this moment so many times over the years, but now that it was happening, she felt frozen. What could she say to him? How could she possibly express what his actions had meant to her life? Jake was scanning the room with professional attention, checking for potential threats and escape routes. His eyes passed over the crowd of diplomats without stopping. Then his gaze reached the Zephyrian delegation. Their eyes met across the crowded hall. Jake's expression changed from professional alertness to shock. He stared at her for a long moment, and she saw recognition dawn in his green eyes. The scared little girl he had saved was gone, replaced by a confident young woman in diplomat's robes. But some things never changed. He would know those violet eyes anywhere. Lyra raised her hand slightly and touched the dog tags through her robes. Jake's eyes followed the movement, and she saw his lips move silently. Lyra. Before either of them could react further, Counselor Thane called the assembly to order. Representatives of the Sindari Collective, we gather today to address the question of human membership in our alliance. The species of Earth seeks full trading rights and military cooperation agreements. But many among us question whether humans can be trusted with such privileges. Ambassador Patricia Kim, the head of the human delegation, stood to respond. She was an experienced diplomat with silver hair and a calm demeanor. Counselor Thane, honored representatives, humanity comes before you today not as conquerors or threats, but as partners seeking mutual benefit and peace. Peace? Counselor Vex of the Anturian species interjected. Your people have been involved in 17 military conflicts in the past decade alone. You expand aggressively into new sectors. Your fleets grow larger every year. How is this the behavior of a peaceful species? Jake remained standing at attention with his security team, but Lyra could see tension in his shoulders. He was listening to aliens debate whether his entire species deserved to exist in galactic society. It had to be frustrating for someone who had spent his career protecting alien civilians. Honorable Vex, Ambassador Kim replied, humans engage in military action only to protect innocent life and defend against aggression. We have never initiated conflicts for conquest or expansion. Every war we have fought has been in defense of ourselves or our allies. That is your interpretation, said Counselor Thane coldly. Others might see it differently. The Corvan Empire, for example, claims that humans attack their legitimate expansion efforts. Lyra felt anger rise in her chest. The Corvans were brutal, conquerors who enslaved or killed entire populations. To suggest that humans were wrong to fight them was absurd. She stood before she could stop herself. Counselor Thane, if I may address the assembly? Thane looked surprised. Ambassador Windstar of Zephyr Prime, you are recognized. Thank you, Lyra said, walking to the center of the hall. I have something to say about human military actions and their true purpose. Jake watched her with intense focus. She could feel his eyes on her as she prepared to tell the story that had shaped her entire life. 15 years ago, I was 8 years old. I lived with my parents on a research station on Vex 7. We were botanists, studying plant life for medical applications. We had never harmed anyone. We had no weapons, no defenses, no military value whatsoever. The hall grew quiet. Lyra's voice carried clearly to every corner. The Corvan Empire attacked our station without warning. They killed everyone. My parents, my friends, our research team. I hid in a storage room while the monsters murdered everyone I loved. I was going to die there, alone and terrified. She paused, touching the dog tags through her robes. But humans came. A small scouting squad that was not supposed to engage in combat. They had orders to observe and report, nothing more. But when they saw survivors in danger, they chose to act. Jake's jaw tightened. He clearly remembered that day as vividly as she did. Lieutenant Jake Morrison and his soldiers risked their lives to save one alien child they had never met. They fought through enemy fire and carried me to safety. They could have followed their orders and left me to die. No one would have blamed them. But they chose to save an innocent life, because that is what humans do. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Several delegates looked toward Jake with new interest. That human soldier gave me his identification tags as a promise. He said humans would always protect those who cannot protect themselves. I wear those tags today because he kept that promise, not just to me but to countless others across the galaxy. Lyra walked closer to the Sindari Council's table. You ask whether humans can be trusted? I say yes, because I have seen their true nature. You worry about human military strength? I say thank the stars for it, because that strength protects the innocent. You question human motives? I say they fight not for conquest, but for justice. Counselor Thane frowned. One rescue does not define an entire species, young ambassador. You're right, Lyra replied. So let me tell you about the other rescues. The mining colony on Zerion 3, saved by human marines when pirates attacked. The refugee fleet from Altair, escorted to safety by human warships. The medical station on Proxima, defended by human soldiers against terrorist attack. She pulled out a datapad and displayed holographic images above the assembly. I have documented over 300 instances of humans risking their lives to protect alien civilians. 300 times, when human military forces chose to save lives instead of pursuing strategic advantage. This is not the behavior of conquerors. This is the behavior of guardians. The images showed human soldiers carrying alien children to safety, human medics treating wounded civilians of various species, human ships defending peaceful colonies against attack. The man who saved my life 15 years ago is in this room today, Lyra continued, looking directly at Jake. Colonel Jake Morrison, known throughout the galaxy as the Guardian of the Rim. His reputation for protecting innocent life is legendary among dozens of species. He represents everything that is best about humanity. Jake looked uncomfortable with the attention, but he stood straighter when the assembly turned to look at him. If you judge humanity by their worst examples, you will find evidence of aggression and violence. But if you judge them by their best examples, you will find heroes who sacrifice everything for strangers. I choose to believe that the best examples represent the true human spirit. Before Counselor Thane could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed and automated voices announced, "Security alert! All personnel to secure positions. This is not a drill." Jake immediately activated his communication device. "Morrison to station security. What's the situation?" "Multiple breaches in sectors 7 and 12, came the response. "Armed intruders, species unknown. They're moving toward the diplomatic levels." Jake turned to Ambassador Kim. "Ma'am, we need to get you and the other delegates to the secure areas immediately." But Counselor Thane stood angrily. "This is exactly what we feared. Humans bring violence wherever they go." "With respect, Counselor," Jake said firmly, "my job right now is to keep everyone in this room alive. We can The diplomatic hall erupted into chaos as delegates from 43 species tried to reach the exits at once. Shouts in dozens of languages filled the air as panic spread through the crowd. The carefully arranged seating dissolved into a mass of confused and frightened beings. Jake's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Everyone stop! Moving in panic will get people killed!" His command training kicked in automatically. Within seconds, he had assessed the situation and begun organizing a response. Roberts, take Team 2 and secure the south exit. Chen, establish communication with the bridge. Martinez, I need a head count of all delegates. Lyra found herself pressed against a wall as the crowd surged around her. She watched Jake work with professional admiration. 15 years ago, he had been a young lieutenant following orders. Now he was a colonel who gave them. But his priority remained the same: protect innocent life. Ambassador Windstar, Jake called out, spotting her across the room. Can you help us organize the civilians? Lyra nodded and immediately began speaking to the nearest delegates in their own languages. Her years of diplomatic training had taught her to communicate with many different species. Please remain calm, she said in Anturian to Counselor Vex. The humans are organizing our evacuation. The humans caused this, Vex replied angrily. They brought violence to our peaceful station. Before Lyra could respond, another explosion rocked the station. This one was much closer, and the lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, casting everything in a red glow. Jake's communication device crackled with updates. Colonel, we've got confirmed hostiles in sections 9 and 11. They're not Corvins. Species unknown, but they're well armed and moving toward your position. Copy that, Jake replied. How many? At least 20, possibly more. They're jamming our sensors in some areas. Counselor Thane pushed his way toward Jake, his stone-like features twisted with anger. Human, your people's presence has brought this disaster upon us. You must take responsibility. Jake looked at him calmly. Counselor, with respect, my responsibility right now is keeping you alive. We can discuss blame after everyone is safe. I will not take orders from a military savage, Thane declared. That was when Lyra stepped between them. Counselor Thane, this military savage once carried me through enemy fire to save my life. I suggest you listen to him if you want to see your family again. Jake gave her a grateful look, then turned back to his team. Status report. South exit is blocked by debris from the explosion, reported Captain Roberts. East exit leads toward the fighting. North exit is clear, but it's a long route to the secure areas. West exit? Jake asked. Unknown. We've lost contact with security. In that sector, Jake thought quickly. The safe route would take too long with this many civilians. The blocked routes were obviously traps. That left the unknown western corridor, which could be anything from clear passage to an ambush. We take the west route, Jake decided. But we do it smart. Roberts, take 5 delegates and scout ahead. If it's clear, signal back. If it's not, fall back and we'll find another way. As the scouting group prepared to leave, Lyra approached Jake. They stood close together for the first time in 15 years, and she could see the weight of command in his eyes. Jake, she said quietly, it really is you. He smiled, and for a moment the years fell away. Hello, Lyra. You've grown up quite a bit since I saw you last. I kept your dog tags, she said, pulling them from beneath her robes. They've been with me every day. Jake's expression softened. I'm glad they helped. I always wondered what happened to the scared little girl I carried out of that station. She became a diplomat, Lyra replied. Someone who fights with words instead of weapons. Both kinds of fighting are important, Jake said. Your speech today was impressive. Thank you for defending humanity. Before Lyra could respond, Roberts's voice came through the communicator. Colonel, west route is clear for about 50 meters, then it gets complicated. There's fighting ahead, but there might be a way around. On our way, Jake replied. Then he turned to address the assembled delegates. Listen carefully. We're going. To move as a group, stay quiet, stay close, and do exactly what my soldiers tell you. We're all going to get through this together. The evacuation began. Jake led the way with 3 soldiers, while the delegates moved in a tight group behind them. Lyra found herself near the front, helping to translate Jake's instructions for delegates who didn't speak English. The corridors of Haven 5 were normally bright and welcoming, decorated with art from many worlds. Now they were dark and ominous, lit only by emergency lights. The sound of distant explosions and weapons fire echoed through the walls. They had gone about 100 meters when Jake raised his hand for everyone to stop. Ahead, they could hear voices speaking in a language none of them recognized. Jake motioned for silence and crept forward to investigate. There's a group of them blocking the main corridor, he whispered when he returned. Maybe 6 individuals armed with energy weapons. We can't go around them. What species are they? Lyra asked. I've never seen anything like them before. Tall, wearing some kind of armor that changes color. Could be chameleon technology. Counselor Thane pushed forward. This is hopeless. We should surrender and negotiate. Negotiate with terrorists? Jake said firmly. Not while I'm breathing. Then what do you propose, human? Demanded Counselor Vex. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he turned to Lyra. How many languages do you speak? 17 fluently. Basics of maybe 30 more. Why? Can you mimic the voice patterns of other species? Sound like you're not Zephyrian? Lyra nodded slowly. It's part of diplomatic training. But what are you thinking? Jake outlined his plan quickly. It was dangerous and required perfect timing, but it might work. Lyra would approach the hostiles from the side corridor, speaking in Anturian and pretending to be a lost delegate. When they were distracted, Jake and his team would attack from behind. Absolutely not, said Ambassador Kim. I won't allow a civilian to take that risk. With respect, Ambassador, Lyra replied. I'm not just a civilian. I'm a trained diplomat with language skills your soldiers don't have. And I'm not helpless. She pulled a small energy weapon from her robes. Zephyrian diplomatic security training. I know how to use this. Jake looked surprised. You're not the scared little girl I remember. No, Lyra agreed. But I'm still someone who believes humans are worth fighting for. The plan went into motion. Lyra made her way through side passages while Jake's team positioned themselves for the ambush. Her heart pounded as she approached the group of hostiles. They were indeed unlike any species she had ever seen, with shifting chameleon-like skin and weapons she didn't recognize. Help me, she called out in Anturian, stumbling into view. Please, I'm lost. The station is under attack. The hostiles turned toward her, their weapons lowering slightly. One of them said something in their strange language. Lyra couldn't understand the words, but the tone seemed questioning. I don't understand, she said, still speaking Anturian. Are you security? Can you help me find the other delegates? The hostiles moved closer, clearly confused by her presence. That was when Jake struck. His team attacked from 3 directions at once, using stun weapons to avoid lethal force. The hostiles were caught completely off guard. 2 went down immediately, but the others recovered quickly and began firing back. Lyra dove for cover as energy beams scorched the walls around her. One of the hostiles turned his weapon toward her, but she was faster. Her diplomatic training had included more than just languages. The energy blast from her weapon caught the hostile center mass, dropping him instantly. The firefight lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, all 6 hostiles were unconscious or disabled. Jake immediately checked his team for injuries while Lyra examined the weapons and equipment left behind. "These aren't Corvin designs," she said, studying. "A fallen energy rifle. The technology is completely unfamiliar, which means we're dealing with someone new," Jake replied grimly. "Someone with advanced tech and the willingness to attack a diplomatic summit." They continued the evacuation, moving more quickly now. The delegates seemed less panicked after seeing the humans successfully protect them. Even Counselor Thane appeared thoughtful rather than angry. As they reached the secure areas of the station, Jake received an update from his fleet. "Colonel, we've identified the attacking ships. They're from the Hegemony, a radical faction that's been operating in the dark sectors. Intelligence suggests they're extremists who want all younger species expelled from this part of the galaxy." "So, not just anti-human," Jake said. "Anti-everyone who isn't old and established." "Correct, sir. The Zephyrians, Anturians, and several other species would also be targets." Lyra felt a chill. This wasn't about humans specifically. It was about fear of change, fear of new ideas and new alliances, the kind of fear that led to genocide. In the secure area, medical teams treated injured civilians while security forces planned their response to the attack. Jake coordinated with station defense, but his primary focus remained on protecting the delegates. Lyra found herself working alongside human soldiers, helping to organize the civilians and provide translation services. She watched Jake move through the crowded secure area, checking on every delegate personally. The diplomatic hall on Haven 5 looked very different the next morning. Repair crews had worked through the night to fix the damage from the terrorist attack. The scorch marks on the walls had been covered, and the broken furniture replaced. But something more important had changed: the atmosphere in the room. Delegates who had arrived suspicious and hostile now spoke quietly among themselves about what they had witnessed. The human soldiers who had risked their lives to protect alien civilians. The cooperation between species during the crisis. The way Colonel Morrison and his team had put everyone else's safety before their own. Lyra stood at the podium once again, but this time she faced a very different audience. Yesterday, many delegates had questioned whether humans deserved a place in galactic society. Today, they were ready to listen with open minds. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "Yesterday we experienced something that no amount of prepared speeches could demonstrate. We saw the true character of humanity under pressure." Counselor Thane, who had been humanity's harshest critic, nodded slowly from his seat at the high table. The attack had changed his perspective dramatically. During the evacuation, he had watched human soldiers put themselves between civilians and danger without hesitation. The hegemony extremists chose to attack this summit because they feared what we represent, Lyra continued. They fear cooperation between species. They fear the changes that come when different peoples work together for common goals. And most of all, they fear humanity's influence on galactic society. She gestured toward Jake, who stood with his security team at the side of the hall. They were right to fear that influence, but not for the reasons they claimed. Humanity's influence makes the galaxy more dangerous for those who prey on the innocent. It makes the galaxy safer for everyone else. Ambassador Kim stepped forward to address the assembly. The human delegation appreciates Ambassador Windstar's support, but we prefer to let our actions speak for themselves. Yesterday, species that had never cooperated before worked together to protect lives and maintain order. That is the future we want to build. Counselor Vex of the Anturians stood up. His attitude toward humans had changed completely since the crisis. The Anturian Republic wishes to formally apologize for questioning human motives. Your soldiers protected our delegates as carefully as they protected their own people. This is the behavior of true allies. One by one, representatives from different species rose to speak in support of human membership in the Sindari Collective. The Zephyrian delegation formally nominated humanity for full membership. The Rigelian Commonwealth seconded the motion. Even the traditionally cautious Centauri Federation added their support. When the final vote was tallied, the result was overwhelming. 38 species in favor, 3 abstaining, and only 2 voting against. Humanity had not just been accepted into the Sindari Collective. They had been welcomed with enthusiasm. Counselor Thane made the announcement official. The Sindari Collective formally recognizes Earth and all human colonies as full members of our alliance. We look forward to a long partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. The hall erupted in applause. Delegates who had been suspicious enemies the day before now congratulated the human diplomats warmly. Jake and his security team maintained their professional demeanor, but Lyra could see the satisfaction in their eyes. After the formal ceremonies ended, smaller groups gathered to discuss specific cooperation agreements. Trade deals, scientific exchanges, and joint security arrangements were negotiated throughout the day. The future of human-alien relations had never looked brighter. But the most important conversation happened much later, when most delegates had returned to their ships. Jake and Lyra found themselves alone on the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars through massive transparent walls. "You did it," Jake said quietly. "You really did it. 15 years ago, you were a scared child hiding from monsters. Today you changed the course of galactic history." Lyra smiled, but she shook her head. "We did it. Your people proved everything I said about human character. Without that proof, my words would have been meaningless." "Still," Jake insisted, "you've become everything I hoped you would when I carried you out of that station. Someone who makes the galaxy a better place." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching ships from dozens of different worlds come and go from the station's docking bays. The site represented everything they had both worked toward. Different species cooperating peacefully, sharing the vast universe as partners rather than enemies. "I have something for you," Lyra said, finally. She reached behind her neck and unclasped the chain holding Jake's dog tags. "Lyra, no," Jake said quickly. "Those are yours. I gave them to you." "You gave them to a scared child who needed something to hold on to," Lyra replied, holding out the tags. "That child grew up. She doesn't need them anymore." Jake looked at the worn metal tags, remembering the day he had placed them around her neck. They seemed so much smaller now than they had 15 years ago. "Keep them," he said gently. "You've earned them more than I ever did. You've spent 15 years fighting for peace and understanding. You've saved more lives with your words than I ever saved with my weapons." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. Everything I've done, every speech I've given, every argument I've made for humanity, it all started with you. You showed me what humans could be at their best. You gave me hope when I had lost everything. And you took that hope and turned it into something bigger than either of us," Jake replied. "You became living proof that the people we save can grow up to save others. You're the reason I keep doing this job." Lyra fastened the chain around her neck again, but this time it felt different. The dog tags were no longer a child's security, blanket, or a reminder of past trauma. They were a symbol of the bond between two people who had dedicated their lives to protecting others. "What happens now?" Lyra asked. "Now we keep working," Jake said. "The galaxy is full of people who need protection, full of species that need to learn to work together, full of children who need to grow up in a safer universe. The Sindari Council offered me a new position," Lyra said. "Interspecies Relations Coordinator. I would be responsible for building cooperation between all member species, not just advocating for humans." "That sounds perfect for you," Jake said, with genuine pride. "What did you tell them?" "I said yes, but only if they also create a new joint peacekeeping force. Something that brings together the best military personnel from all member species to protect civilians and maintain peace." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. They want me to command this joint force." "The position is yours if you want it," Lyra confirmed. "A chance to be the guardian of the rim for the entire Sindari collective, not just humanity." Jake thought about it for a moment. It would be a massive responsibility, coordinating military forces from dozens of different species with different traditions and capabilities. But it was also an opportunity to build something unprecedented, a truly multi-species military organization dedicated to protecting innocent life. "Will you be working closely with this peacekeeping force?" he asked. "Very closely," Lyra replied with a smile. "The diplomatic and military branches would need to coordinate constantly." "Then I accept," Jake said, "but only if you promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll never stop being the person who stands up for what's right, even when it's difficult. The galaxy needs people like you." "Promise me the same thing," Lyra replied. "The galaxy needs people like you, too." They shook hands formally, then laughed at the absurdity of it. After everything they had been through together, a handshake seemed ridiculous. "Come here," Jake said, opening his arms. Lyra hugged him tightly, and for a moment she was 8 years old again, feeling safe in the arms of the soldier who had saved her. But now she was also a grown woman who had saved him right back, and they were partners in the most important work in the galaxy. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "Thank you," Jake replied, "for showing me that the children we save can grow up to save the galaxy." As they stood together on the observation deck, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead, both of them understood that their story was far from over. They had spent 15 years growing into the people they were, meant to be. Now they would spend the rest of their lives building the future they both believed in. Somewhere out there in the vast galaxy, other children were in danger. Other species needed to learn cooperation instead of conflict. Other innocence required protection from those who would harm them. Jake Morrison, the guardian of the Rim, and Lyra Windstar, the voice of peace, would be there to help them. Together, they would make sure that the galaxy remained a place where scared children could grow up to become heroes, where different species could work as partners, and where the promise of protection given to one alien child 15 years ago would extend to every corner of known space. The little girl who had been saved had become a woman who saved others. The soldier who had risked everything for a stranger had become a leader who would risk everything for entire civilizations. Their bond, forged in fire and fear, had become something stronger, a partnership that would help shape the future of galactic civilization. In the